What is up, Apush? World War II, 1941, 1945. This is going to be three segments of this, so look for different videos. I'll send them to you on email, probably like 30 different times, right? Um, so let's talk about Easter first. Shout out to my peeps. These things are really nasty. I don't know if you like these things or not, but I don't know why they make them, but people still buy them, I guess. Hope everybody had a happy Easter, every bunny. How are you spending the holiday? Hanging with my peeps. Now you're just some bunny that I used to know. It's a pretty good one. Happy Easter to all my peeps. Come in all different colors. FDR's foreign policy. The good neighbor policy. Go to Wendy's, ask for the good neighbor policy, give you 20% off. So this good neighbor policy is looking at how the United States will interact with foreign countries, specifically in Latin America. Okay, they're looking to change what was what was Teddy Roosevelt's corollary, what the Monroe Doctrine was before, and being aggressive with what TR did on Panama and Cuba and Santo Domingo and etc. So FDR says, hey, let's just be buddies, and let's keep the bad guys out, and we'll take a completely different approach as far as not bringing in our military to intervene with any what we see as chronic wrongdoing. So that stuff is changing here with the good neighbor policy, and wanting to be more a team within this effort to keep communism and other different ideologies out of the Western Hemisphere. So in 1933, the Pan American Conference, FDR basically says this: we will not intervene, and you guys can do what you want, but in good faith, let's keep the bad guys out. So Cuba doesn't like the United States from the Platt Amendment, in which the United States helped kick out Spain. Remember that from the Spanish-American War? But the Platt Amendment said that the United States was going to stick around, and it puts naval bases in Cuba and says that you can't make agreements unless we say that we like who you're making agreements with. So basically it puts control of the United States in Cuba. So they don't like us for that. But FDR says, all right, you guys can do what you want. Just let us keep Guantanamo Bay. If you remember Mexico with Wilson, and Wilson tried to direct who was in control, removing Bautista and inserting Carranza basically back in Carranza so he could get control of the Mexican government, so that the big corporations in which U.S. investors put money into Mexico to extract all of its major resources. Now there is a Mexican government that wants to take those properties back and put them under Mexican control so that they could make the money off of it. And FDR sides on the side of Mexico within this. He says, hey, U.S. corporations, you're going to have to negotiate because this isn't our land, this isn't our territory, this is Mexico, and you better do some deals with Mexico, otherwise you're going to lose everything. So that's pretty significant in siding with the opposing government, in this case Mexico. He recognized the Soviet Union, which other presidents had not done before. So the communist control of Stalin and the Soviet Union is recognized by Franklin Roosevelt. The Philippines will get their independence in 1946. So this is going to happen over a gradual amount of time here up until 1946, in which the Philippines will no longer have the United States in control of them. And he reduces tariffs by 50% to promote international trade. So all of these efforts before to protect U.S. industries within the United States against foreign competitors here, reducing those tariffs so that now the foreign policy is to involve more international trade for the United States and bring in things from other countries. The political spectrum, let's talk about this. So this is very relevant to what we're talking about as far as the election goes in today's 2016 run for United States presidency through the Republican and Democrat parties. In the middle, you have moderates, and that's where a lot of people fit, with maybe a little bit leaning to one side or the other. If you go to the right, you have the more conservative views. If you go to the left, you have more liberal views. If you go far to the left, you have radical views, and if you go far to the right, you have reactionary views. So if you're looking at somebody that's far left, um, that you want to compare this to, it would be Bernie Sanders. If you're looking at somebody that's far right, many people would say that Donald Trump is a reactionary. And let's look at how these play out here, with Democrats being on the liberal moderate side, Republicans on the moderate to conservative side. Examples of these, looking at the time period that we're discussing with World War II, um, you have far left communist socialists, and you have far right fascist Nazis. So Roosevelt would fit in this liberal to moderate side. Winston Churchill would fit on the conservative to moderate side, and then Stalin would fit on that communist socialist side on the far left as a radical. And here's a meme for Stalin. We got more Stalin memes to come. Uh, Later, much later, we're going to get through a bunch of Hitler's memes first, which hopefully will be not offensive but funny. Here's one of them. Test the waters. Get it? Third Reich picture. Alika, you got it? Alright, good. Features of totalitarianism. One party, one leader, no opposition. Alright, everybody fits into one mindset, one idea, one philosophy, one agenda. If you have opposing views, if you want to do something different, then you don't fit within that society. And so most likely you will be killed or exiled. They use physical and psychological terror. So people are in constant fear if they have any sort of opposition to what is accepted in these totalitarian forms of government. Usually it involves gun control, so you don't get your weapons, you don't get the Second Amendment, you get nothing, and the government has everything. That way there is no rise of opposition, there is no revolution. They can keep total control if they have all the guns. A centrally controlled and directed economy, they get to decide all of the production, what is going to be produced, who's going to do it, what kind of things they're going to grow, what kind of things they're going to manufacture, and the government controls all of that. There is no free market here within this. And a monopoly on mass communication. Everything's censored. If you are writing for a newspaper, you're writing for the government. You are promoting those kinds of things that the government wants you to promote into society. And there's a whole bunch of propaganda and all kinds of stuff that goes in with this monopoly of mass communication. Hitler's foreign policy, guys, we're going to talk about this quite a bit here. There's a depression going on in Germany, there's a depression going on in the United States, there's a depression going on basically everywhere in the world. And the Treaty of Versailles, that was signed by many countries, but not the United States, in Europe, is not going as they had hoped with the League of Nations. So Hitler uses the problems that Europe is having, especially in Germany, within his own people, that allows him to gain a lot of power. Yeah, so his rise to power can be tied to the problems of the League of Nations and the Treaty of Versailles and the Depression. We talked about the last chapter, the Dawes Plan, in which the United States Congress passed legislation to ease the repayment of Germany's debt towards France and Great Britain, hopefully getting this cycle of money to be able to allow Germany to pay back all of the reparations in which they owed, and then that would allow the United States to get its payments back from France and Great Britain as well from World War I. So that, coupled with the Kellogg-Briand Pact, will also help Hitler's rise to power as the Kellogg-Briand Pact was all of these countries that decided that they were going to renounce war. War was not going to be an option to solve problems, and Hitler will go back on what Germany has accepted as part of this Kellogg-Briand Pact. But other countries that signed it saying, hey, we're not going to go to war, but Hitler is like, all right, I'll use that to my advantage. So within Germany, the Jews are blamed. The Jews are the bad guys. The Jews are what caused World War I as them to fail. So then they become the scapegoats, and they become the targets here of Germany as the other group that is not this Aryan nation in which Hitler is going to promote. So unemployed Germans will be attracted to Hitler's promises. He's going to say, look, if you want to get jobs, if you want to get things back rolling, if you want a better life, then I'm the guy that's going to provide that for you. And he has a lot of people follow him. And the brown shirts are his army, in which gained control of the German legislature in 1933. And that, from then on, will get the ball rolling in all of his foreign policies, which we'll talk about here, which happened quite quickly, leading towards World War II. This one is a good one. Saturday Night Fever is the movie, so Saturday Night Führer, as he was the Führer of Germany. And if you've seen John Travolta's Saturday Night Fever, this one's pretty awesome. It's probably right up there for most of you with pole dancing, right? And polka mania. All right. Hitler's foreign policy, 1933, withdraws from the League of Nations. That's a bad sign, but nobody's going to do anything yet about this. 1934, a non-aggression pact with Poland. We'll talk about the significance of Poland here being between German borders, and I'll show you a map here in a second. But 1935, they leave the disarmament conference in which these countries are coming together to say, hey, let's reduce our militaries so that we don't have this threat of a world war again. And Hitler's like, I'm not going to do that, so he's out. And then in 1936, they remilitarized the Rhineland, which was part of that Treaty of Versailles, in which France would occupy the Rhineland. Here's what I was talking about with the map. So on the far left, you have the Rhineland, which connects to the far eastern parts of France and the western parts of Germany, and then also connected to Belgium. We'll see Belgium get run over here again. I forgot what the other thing was. The non-aggression pact with Poland. So you can't see it over here. I've got a better map later. We'll talk about it in a second. Here's another meme for you. Today's forecast will be rain with a strong chance of hail. Okay, so 1938, they annex Austria. I think the map is coming back up. There it is. So Austria down at the bottom becomes part of Germany. Now he's got Germany as the Rhineland and Austria, and then we'll see the other parts here. I've gotten white and Czechoslovakia next to the white area. So Reich and Roll, another great meme. Hitler, rock star. The Munich Conference. Hitler, Mussolini, Chamberlain, Dallier, France. These guys all get together in Munich and decide that Hitler's going to get Czechoslovakia. But Czechoslovakia was not present within this meeting. So, the Sudetenland is part of that map that I'll show you again, which has economic benefits for Hitler. Industry, banks, resources that is going to help him grow his military and solidify his power and influence over German society here. This is known as appeasement, the policy of giving in to demands. So when my son repeatedly asks for things over and over and over and over and over again, and I say no, and I say no, and I say no, and I say no, and then I say yes, that's appeasement, giving in to demands for a potential enemy. Now, my son's not an enemy, but what's going to happen is that this appeasement is going to continue with other things. So one day it's candy, the next day it's a car, and then it's a house, and then, you get the idea. So I'm sure you do this with your parents, and some of you try it with me, with grades and whatnot. Nazi! Yahtzee's a good game, but Nazi's not so much a good game. Hitler's foreign policy continued. 1939, the annexation of the rest of Czechoslovakia. So I'll show you the map, I promise. Map's coming up, with the rest of Czechoslovakia becoming part of Hitler's regime and domain as it extends beyond its borders. And a non-aggression pact with Stalin and the Soviet Union. This one will be interesting. We saw the non-aggression pact with Poland. Both of these non-aggression pacts will be broken as he gains more power. So here's the map. Germany separated by Poland. So Poland's in the way as far as unifying Germany. So guess what? Poland, you're going to get invaded. So 1939, Poland invaded by Germany. Here it is with the meme version. You get the idea. Poland submits to rule by Hitler. And then in 1940, you got a triple party with Italy and Japan, as you have foreign rulers like Emperor Hirohito and Benito Mussolini of Italy that also have these kind of fascist regimes in which they are highly nationalistic and they fit with the fascist Nazis of Germany under Hitler. This one's blurry, but it's still good. Got the first two questions wrong, but I got the third right. Funny, but I did not see that coming. Enough of the Nazi jokes, they make me furious. So Italy, Benito Mussolini seizes power in 1922. As he seizes power, eventually that power consolidates into the same type of fascist regime as the Nazis in Germany, but this is a little bit different. They're definitely fearing communism as they go through this transitional period, and the fascist rule of Mussolini is attracted from World War I veterans and people that have unified Italy in previous years before World War I, and then the black shirts that are controlled by Mussolini allow him to be a dictator and stay in power through World War II. Japan, again, the fascist regime here led by Emperor Hirohito, and the nationalists will convince Hirohito to invade China and Southeast Asia to obtain raw materials that they lack. So they are a group of islands here in which they don't necessarily have everything they need to become a dominant military power and a dominant industry in the world. So they have to get their fuel, their oil, from other places. They have to get natural resources in which they can make things out of iron and tin for their ships and their weapons and things like that to make their military much stronger. So breaking the open door policy with John Hay, which was set up in the early 1900s, basically taking China for itself and extracting the resources there, and then some of the other places that are in and around, which we'll talk about when we get to the second section here of Japan, focusing on Japan itself. The isolationists in the United States, most of them are going to come from the Midwest, most of them will be farmers, most of them will be Republicans. They don't want to get involved in the war. They do not want to see World War I happen again and have the United States dragged into European affairs that will lead to the United States involved in World War II. So they think that the bankers and these factories that all push the war effort are to blame, and they're trying to make sure that that is well known in the public, that this is a war that will only benefit the rich and those that are greedy to make even more money. So these influenced the Neutrality Acts in the 1930s, which we'll go through here, the isolationists of the United States. So 1935, Neutrality Act. Italy is invading Ethiopia. It is threatening. They will invade Ethiopia, but in 1935 they're threatening to invade Ethiopia again, extend their imperialistic reign over weaker countries and extract resources and labor from Ethiopia. That should say prohibit, so prohibit the sale of munitions to all belligerents whenever the president should claim a state of war existed. So if the president says there's war here, then we will not trade with these countries. They become belligerents. They are invading other countries for no good reason, and that's what the definition here is. Belligerents, and munitions are weapons and ammunition and things for war supplies. The Americans who took passage on belligerent ships did so at their own risk. So again, a warning to American people that if you're going to travel on the seas that are involved with these wars in the Mediterranean or in the Atlantic, that, hey, it's not the United States' fault, and we're not going to get dragged into war if there are Americans that die on these ships traveling around. So the United States warns Italy that they're not going to get stuff from the United States if they invade Ethiopia. They do it anyway. Neutrality Act of 1936 prohibits all loans to belligerents, so no money to any countries that are considered um, belligerents, which are invading weaker countries, or any country for that matter. The Neutrality Act of 1937, there's a civil war going on in Spain, and the dictator Franco is going to consolidate power and take over Spain, and the neutrality acts by the United States say we will not send any war supplies, weapons to a country that is at civil war with themselves. That way, it might be as if the United States is picking sides. They don't want to pick sides. So, an embargo on those kinds of things. And stay off belligerent ships, beware, is the warning by the President and Congress and the United States itself. So the president gets discretionary authority to place the sale of goods to belligerents on cash and carry basis. If these countries wanted to come to the United States and buy what they needed, what they wanted, then they took all the risk. They were going to bring their ships, they were going to load it with the contract they made within the companies of the United States, and they were going to pay them directly, and then they were going to leave. So the United States did not get involved in international waters with the possibility of any of their ships being sunk. Now, if their ships got sunk with all American goods on it, too bad, because the United States already got paid within no loans being a part of this. 1939, you're going to see the same thing. Permitted sale of arms and other contraband on cash and carry basis. Ships paid in cash and took all the risk themselves. American ships forbidden to carry products to belligerents. So the United States, you can't leave. This is similar to the Embargo Act, in which, and the Non-Intercourse Act, in which Jefferson did prior to the War of 1812. But the cash and carry basis is there so that the economy can still benefit from supplying things to those at war. Short-term loans are approved within this Neutrality Act of 1939 as well. Joseph grew some eyebrows. Check out those eyebrows. Those things are on fleek. He's the ambassador to Japan for the United States. Here's what he says. It seems to be increasingly clear that we are bound to have a showdown someday, and the principal question at issue is whether it is our advantage to have that showdown sooner or have it later. This is December 14th, 1940. So Japan, we will talk about a little bit more in the next section, but this is a warning here by the ambassador of the United States that has a close relationship with Japan, and says there's something inevitable that's going to happen. Just when is it going to happen and who's going to start it? So bases for destroyers, 1940. This is seen as the United States picking a side, the side of Great Britain and the Allies. So 50 destroyers are traded to Great Britain to improve their navy in exchange for 6 bases for the United States to have in the Caribbean, which were British-owned islands. The Committee to Defend America First in 1940, the war has begun in Europe, and the FDR pro-British policies, as an example that we just talked about with the bases for destroyers exchange, alarms many people in the United States that say, look, this is going to tie the United States to Great Britain and is going to bring us into this war. So there are a lot of German immigrants in the United States that side with the Nazis. Others are advocating for neutrality within this group that is the Committee to Defend America First. You might recognize a couple of these people. Henry Ford, we talked about with the affordable cars. Charles Lindbergh, we didn't talk about, but maybe you know as the first solo flight across the Atlantic. So he's extremely popular in the United States, and so is Ford. So these, with some other of these actors and famous people, celebrities, decide that they are going to lead speeches and propaganda, radio advertisements, and things across the country to reach people to tell them, look, we do not want to get involved in the war. This is what's happening, and kind of pressure Roosevelt and Congress to avoid any sort of alignment with Great Britain or otherwise. So the problems with this were that the reports and stuff that are coming back and in the news and what people are hearing on the radio about the war in Europe is overwhelming, and what the Nazis are doing, we're not exposed to the Holocaust at this time, but we do know that they're going through Poland. We know that they're going through Belgium, and that they're expanding into all of these places in which the Treaty of Versailles said, hey, this is not supposed to happen. So that doesn't allow this Committee to Defend America First to have too much persuasion of the American public to stay out of the war. More what the Germans are doing affects people. The Lend-Lease Act, 1941. This is a big one. This is on your quiz and on your test. This says the president can transfer anything that he wants to another country, either by selling it, lending it, or leasing it as materials for war. So $7 billion of materials that the president gets the power to determine where it goes and when it goes and who gets it and all that kind of stuff. So remember this. It ends the Neutrality Acts. This ties the United States to the Allies, and it gives the United States the ability to supply Russia with weapons and tanks, and Great Britain with their navy and supplies for the war. The Greer Incident, July 1941. So this is going to be the United States involved here with a U-boat. The U.S. destroyer Greer is tracking the U-652, which is a German submarine, and it radios its position to the British Navy. So it's intelligence giving to the British to help try to destroy the German submarine here. It's not attacking it itself until the German U-boat launches a torpedo. Once that happens, then the Greer drops the depth charges to try to blow up the submarine. Neither are destroyed within this incident in 1941 July. The Atlantic Charter, this is big. This is on your quiz and on your test. This is a agreement before the United States gets really involved with Churchill and Roosevelt. So they're coming up with the goals in which they want to have after they have victory within the war. They both agree that there would be no land gains. Okay, so this is just Churchill and Roosevelt, because we'll see Stalin come in here later during the war and change what this Atlantic Charter is set out to do. The lines that are drawn after the war, as countries are either broadened or shrunken by who wins the war, these territorial adjustments will be drawn by the people that are living there. Self-determination, once they draw the lines, those get to decide what their government is. Global economic cooperation and social welfare become the new direction of defending societies around the world. So free trade, cooperation in which countries will get along. It will provide things so that people don't have this desire to rise to power and take over other people's stuff. A world free of want and fear. This is something that Roosevelt holds very strong within his values. And we'll talk about chaos and fear and how that leads towards regime changes and people's promises, leading to like how Hitler becomes in power over a large group of people. And then a common disarmament post-war, in which these countries will agree that they will not extend their militaries beyond what is necessary. The Reuben James. This one is the United States destroyer that is sunk by a U-boat October 1941. The United States is not in the war yet, but this will be another reason that will bring them closer to war. This is before the bombing in Pearl Harbor. But FDR authorizes the arming of merchant ships and permits them to carry cargoes to Allied ports. So this opens up trade. This is not a repeat of it is a repeat of what we've seen in other United States foreign policy. We saw this before with the War of 1812. We saw this before the World War I. So it says, you know, go out and continue to trade, but arm yourselves and make sure that you know that there's danger out there. All right, we're going to stop here, and then we'll start the next section on the next video. All right, peace. Not really, because it's war, but peace out.